Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie O'Hearn, and welcome to today's webinar, Communication and Media Relations to Raise Awareness of the Ombudsman Program. And before I start the webinar and introduce the speakers, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the PowerPoint and recording will be emailed to everyone who has registered. We will be monitoring the Q&A, so if you have questions for the speakers, please put them in the Q&A box. You can use the chat feature to submit any comments or respond to questions from the speakers or other attendees. And at the end of the webinar, please be sure to complete the evaluation questionnaire. Your feedback is very valuable to us. And then all links and resources will be posted on our website, emailed to you, and posted in the chat during the webinar. Our speakers today are media experts Kristen Hyde and Katie Hewitt. Kristen has over 30 years of experience in strategic communications and media relations for progressive policy advocacy, campaigns, mission-driven organizations, and foundations. She's known for her skill in putting lived experience voices and compelling stories into the spotlight to achieve impact. And Katie has over 18 years of experience integrating digital strategies with traditional with traditional to create social change. She focuses on legislative advocacy, nonprofit communications, training and mentoring, and social behavior change campaigns. So now I will pass it off to Kristen.
Thanks so much, Katie, for having us. It's great to be here with you all. And this may be review for some of you, I don't know. I think we did this kind of webinar a couple of years ago, but if it's review, sorry, or hopefully it's helpful. Here to talk about how you can leverage especially free/earned media coverage to help you communicate with folks that you're trying to reach, engage them in supporting what you're trying to do. I'm going to go to the next slide here. So objectives today, getting ideas, spurring your thinking around how you can use media outreach, reaching out to your local newspapers, radio and TV to kind of as a megaphone to help reach your audiences and raise awareness about what you're doing as ombudsmen and advocates for residents in long-term care. And also as a way beyond reaching and getting those audiences to do something, it's also another great tool for cultivating and recognizing the hard work that staff and volunteers are doing in the program. So you might say, well, how can news stories help me, accomplish my goals? I'm here to advocate for residents, and that's, enough, and really busy doing that. How would working with the media help me? And really, it's kind of this, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, does it make a sound? You're doing great work. But getting your audience, whether that's the residents themselves, resident families, agency folks who, are in charge of administering, inspecting and licensing long-term care, policymakers, funders, people you want to donate to the program. When you can magnify and put the good work in the spotlight, more people hear about it. It's kind of a circular circle of events, right? More people are aware, they're more informed, they're more supportive and engaged with what you're doing. It also increases your credibility, makes you kind of a go-to resource who, folks can call for help, for policymakers to count on for expertise, and for media, again, to go to about any issues that involve long-term care. And it just keeps building your ability and to impact your goals. I'm going to make a distinction here between, sometimes people call it free media, but basically what we're talking about here is traditional media coverage. So a newspaper article, a radio story, a TV story that you didn't pay for, but I call it earned because you might have had to work pretty hard to get that story, right? Calling the reporter, lining up somebody for them to talk to, facilitating a photo shoot, getting a bunch of background information and statistics to the reporter that they might need to do their story. So you're still working for it. It's earned, but you're not actually buying it like you would an advertisement. This if on this is meant to say, if you had budget to do paid media, basically paid advertising, you could add that on as a whole nother layer, right, to appear in local media. This bus, you might not be able to see very well, is there's an ad on the side of this bus called a transit, ad. And we did it this year in Washington State in a couple of counties to see if that would help raise awareness. We had a QR code on that ad that folks could scan and would bring them to the webpage for the Ombudsman program. And specifically, this was aimed at trying to recruit new volunteers. So it was a paid example of a paid ad. We tried to track, how impactful it was. Did we get folks to the website through this ad? And I have to be honest, we don't think we got that many people. And it's not surprising, right? A bus goes by. Is anybody really stopping to go to the website when they see a bus ad? Maybe not. But it also kind of helps to just kind of do a surround sound where maybe somebody read a story about ombudsman volunteers in their paper, and then they saw this on the bus, and then they heard a PSA on the radio, and then their neighbor said something about the program. It's just sort of reinforcing awareness. But again, it costs money, and it's, an example of paid ads, like you would buy, an ad in the print newspaper or the online newspaper. These other examples at the bottom of the slide are examples of earned media coverage. So pitching a story to the reporter at a local paper on how, what volunteers are doing and getting them connected with a volunteer to share their experience. This one on the right, I worked with a volunteer to draft a guest opinion column or a op-ed in her local paper. And so that was straight, from the mouth of a volunteer, appears in the local news, didn't cost us anything. Oh, here's another one. I don't know if this will play when I hit it. I don't think it will. This on the upper right side is like a PSA that we used on radio and public radio stations, and also a couple of TV stations. It was super basic to put together. We used still pictures, not actual video, with a voiceover narrating a 15-second spot on what the Ombudsman program does and what volunteers do, and kind of urging the listener to go to our website or call to learn more information. That was a paid spot, but it was not very expensive. So if folks have, budgets, and that one we think actually has gotten a lot of traction, and we've heard feedback. I heard this on the public radio, or I saw this spot, and it brought me to the page. So that one, I think, that campaign was maybe 6 or 8 weeks and maybe cost $3,000, just to give you some example. Okay, so you might ask yourself, well, that sounds good, but where do I get started? I don't even know, where to start. The homework of doing earned media and sort of getting a reporter to do your story is you do some homework up front. What news, think about the root of the word news. It's new. You've got to package, what we have to say as something that might be interesting to more than a couple people, interesting to the whole community. Thinking about, we call them hooks, like maybe there's an anniversary or an event, or a celebrity came to visit a nursing home. These are all hooks that media might be interested in covering. New studies and reports, are coming out all the time around things. For instance, the new federal initiatives. I know CMS has been issuing some new guidance to try to tamp down the problem of illegal or improper use of antipsychotic drugs, for example, in nursing homes. That might get some news coverage. Well, that's a hook for you to go in and say to that reporter, hey, one of the best ways to, make sure that residents' rights to be free of chemical restraints are to have an advocate, whether that's a family member or ombudsman, to help make sure that they're not the subject of that. So that's what I mean when I say hook. I think the most relevant one really for this, for all these folks, is human interest. You know, what are you interested in when you listen to the news or read the paper? Most people are interested in the people in their community and what's happening with them, with their neighbors. So subjects that, that affect a large percentage of your community and that are people oriented and really feature people that inspire others reading the story to get involved are called kind of human interest stories that are really, I think, relevant to the work of the ombudsman. Breaking it down, and again, you're going to have access to all of these slides, is again, it's not rocket science to do media, but it does take some thought, thinking through how you're going to frame that story, that pitch. And when I say pitch, think of the elevator pitch. You're, a script writer is caught in the elevator with a producer. How do you convey your idea in 30 seconds in a way that's compelling for the reporter to say, I get it. I think that's interesting. I want to pursue that. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? What's the story? And think about the components of a typical kind of children's story. Have something or someone or some system that is a threat or a problem or a villain. Somebody is or something is at risk. A community is at risk or potentially is a victim. And then there's a hero or a solution. All of these are not meant to be an actual person. Maybe it's very systemic. An example being, I don't know, when a long-term care facility is short-staffed, that's the problem, right? That's kind of the villain. And who's at risk are the residents and their quality of care. And a solution might be systemic, like a law that requires a certain number of hours and staff and ratios that are improved. Stories, again, are people oriented. So have a real world example, an anecdote, and you don't need to ever reveal, for example, a specific facility name or a resident's name in order to have a real life humanize the numbers that you're conveying and the problems with policies that you're conveying. And the other thing with reporters and media is to be a good resource, providing information about just helping to educate the media and reporters about long-term care issues, even if it doesn't result in a story that day. Being a good resource will enable reporters to have a relationship with you where they might call you in the future whenever they're doing a story around long-term care. Okay. Again, another step you might take before you start calling reporters to pitch stories is making sure you've identified, who is doing the talking here. Who's the story about? Is there a resident who's willing to talk about their experience, a resident family member, a volunteer, or a staff person? All of these folks can be ambassadors for talking about the great work that the Ombudsman program does. You cannot see this slide at all in the middle, or this image at all, probably. It was like a survey, an electronic survey that we in Washington State issued to volunteers in the program to get to know a little bit more about them. Who are you? Where did you come from? How did you hear about the program? How long have you been with the program? What do you find rewarding about your role? What's challenging about it? Just kind of really getting, and then we asked them, would you be willing to publicly share about your experience? Would you be willing to talk to media? That kind of thing. So it really helped us identify where there might be pockets of volunteers, in this case, who are excited and willing to share their experience if the opportunity arose with media. On the left is a photo of a new volunteer being mentored by a staff person and visiting a resident, and was willing to be in a photo shoot about that. So that was helpful to build our kind of image bank. On the right is another guest column, and this was working with a resident who was willing to go public with her own name and her own experience through the pandemic at her home in Yakima, Washington. Again, there's really no more powerful voice than the voice of residents talking about how the Ombudsman program helps helps them. Cultivate your relationship with those reporters. Again, where to start? You know, most people don't have a media list already made, but the good news is with Google now and how easy it is to look things up, jump online, you know, find out who the newspapers are in your area if you don't already know. You know, search local newspapers, radio stations in your area, and you'll get to their websites, and just do a little review yourself. Find out who's covering topics related to long-term care. You know, put in some search terms like nursing home residents during COVID or whatever it might be, and see who's reporting on those in the last in recent months or weeks. That gives you an idea of who's going to be interested in your story idea. If you're again, most of their information should be living online through their contact us page. You can usually find, you know, hey, this is our newsroom phone number, or this is the number or email for how to get in touch with us with a story idea. So you can grab that information right off their webpage. I encourage you to reach out by phone whenever possible. You're not always going to get somebody on the other line, but if you do, it's definitely the quickest way to get a conversation going and get a read on whether they're going to be interested, and find out who is the right reporter for you to talk to. But phone and email are a great way to communicate with reporters. Offering to connect the reporter with other people to talk to, doing a lot of the work for them is going to increase your chances that media is going to be interested in doing this story. If they have to do all the work to try to find people who are willing to talk to them, jump through hoops to get permissions. But if you're able to come to them and say, hey, I've got 3, you know, people for you to talk to. One of them is a resident, one's a family member, one's a volunteer, or I've got even somebody at the facility who's willing to talk to you, or I've gotten permissions from everybody for you to take photos. That really helps lower the bar. So an example of how this worked recently, again, in Washington State, all my examples are from Washington. That's where I've been working most on with the Ombudsman program out here. We, like probably everyone, have lost so many volunteers over the pandemic. So our focus has been really telling stories about our need for more volunteers, what volunteers do, profiling the fantastic work of current active volunteers, reaching out to papers to say, hey, would you like to tag along and meet this volunteer and hear about their experience? And it's been working. We've gotten a number of great stories like this that inspire the community. Here's some more. Another idea, there's, you know, of course, like-minded organizations, you know, AARP, other aging agencies, other nonprofits and groups that might be willing to carry an article if you do the writing and the work for them. So you write the article, get some images together, and they will post it on their website or in their e-newsletter or their printed newsletter. I know that's been really effective for us. AARP, of course, massive amounts of people. You know, in Washington State, I think they have 1 million members at least, and their e-newsletter went out to, I think, 250,000 people. So carrying our article for free that we wrote, every time we've done that with them, we've seen a huge boost in visits to the website and people filling out the wanting to learn more about becoming a volunteer. What happens when reporters call you and you weren't expecting it, or you're not sure what they want? Just a couple, I want everyone to never panic when that happens. Never feel obligated to talk to the reporter at that moment. You know, a lot of times just let it go into voicemail, or if you did get the phone, ask them right then and there, you know, who are you? Who do you work for? Can I get your phone number or your contact information and get back to you? Let me know what you're asking about, what your deadline is, and I'll get back to you. That gives you a minute to think about it, how you're going to approach this opportunity. Should someone else return their call? Just never feel obligated to talk to them that second. And definitely try to keep good, solid, at least neutral relationships going with reporters in your area, media outlets in your area. As Mark Twain said, never pick a fight with people who buy ink by the barrel. Just, you want to have a good relationship there. We don't think of reporters as friends or enemies. They're neither. They're really kind of a neutral, almost like a communications channel. Think of them almost like a microphone that you can use to communicate with your audience. And they need you as much as we need them. They're looking for good stories, and you have good stories to tell. Here's some lingo you might have heard before, and I just want to go over it quickly. It actually recently happened with an organization I was working with, where someone did do an interview with a reporter, and within hours or days afterwards said, I actually don't feel comfortable having done that. I don't want them to quote me in their story. Really good to think about this right up front and assume that anytime you or anyone talks to a reporter, you are on the record. And even if you choose to kind of go in the territory of saying something that's off the record, or that you don't want them to quote you saying, it's risky. It's dicey legally, it's risky. And I recommend not doing it unless you're really 100% sure it's with what you want to do. And if you want to do that, make it really clear with the reporter. Maybe do it at the end of your conversation and say, okay, I'm done being on the record. Can I talk to you off the record starting right now? And make it really clear, so you're not jumping back and forth and the reporter doesn't have to remember when you were on the record and when you were off the record. If you're the one doing the interview, again, take some time to get yourself prepared, make some notes, have a sentence or a story or a few key data points that are right at your fingertips that you're ready to bring up. Assume that the reporter and the public that you're speaking through the reporter to knows a lot less than you might think they might know about long-term care, whatever you're talking about. Try not to use, acronyms and terms that, where did I have that? Like jargon, like CMS. I know what it is, but most people don't. So don't use insider terms and acronyms. This seems obvious, but definitely say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know, if you don't know the answer to a reporter's question. Never say no comment. You can just kind of probably picture in your head what that looks like. When people say no comment, it almost makes them seem like they have something to hide or they're guilty about something. If you're hearing misinformation, though, something that is simply not true, stop the reporter right then and say, I'm sorry, but I have to correct you. That's not true. Or in my experience, whenever you refer to your own experience or what you know for sure to be true, that's really positive ground to be on. Think about quotes that are quotable, right? Think a good quote is something that is going to conjure up an image or a feeling in the person like listening to that story or reading it. Whatever you feel about this quote up here on the right-hand side, nursing home residents are being treated like prisoners alone in their rooms for months. I can picture that in my mind. It's a thought that's probably going to stick with me. So those are the kinds of things you want to think about. If you only have 20 seconds or you're only going to get one sentence in that big story, is it a quote that's going to be impactful? And then there's some useful phrases to help kind of transition if a reporter's asking you questions that are really not relevant or taking you away from what you want to talk about. You can use some of these transition phrases to get back to what you came there to say. And I'm not going to go through, I'm running low on time. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we will share them. And these are sort of quick definitions in case you want to remember, you want to know, when do I use a press release? What is a letter to the editor? How is that different? How is an editorial different than an op-ed? What's a press advisory versus a press release? Here's some handy definitions for you. And let's finally, what is the impact of doing all this work to get media attention? And again, like I've said, we've seen a big spike on folks wanting to learn about the Ombudsman program, coming to the webpage, even applying to be volunteers, right around when we've done a lot of work to do media, both paid and earned. So we might have done paid for that radio sponsorship, or worked with a local newspaper to put digital articles and ads on their website and email to their subscriber list. And it really does drive traffic. All right, with that, I'm going to wind down. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen. That was excellent and really helpful. If anyone has any questions for Kristen, we can take them now, just so we don't have to hold them all to the end. So if you have them, you can put them in the Q&A box. And I just wanted to mention that the slides and the recording will be emailed to everyone. And the slides are in the link or in the chat. You can see the link and download the slides now. So we don't have any questions at the moment, but I'll just give everyone a minute. Maybe they're typing. Okay, I don't see any now, but if you think of them, feel free to add them in the Q&A box and we'll ask questions again toward the end. So, thanks, Kristen.
Hi, so again, I'm Katie Hewitt, and I am here today to talk more about the social media side of things. So Kristen was talking a lot about what earned media looks like, and as we all know, social media is another way to get your message out organically. But it feels like, for many people, it can feel like a huge lift, and you don't know exactly what to say or how to say it. You don't know how to get the message out beyond your kind of your echo chamber, the people who are already following you. And so I have some really basic tips and tricks to help you not spend as much time as you think you need to on social media, and to have a big impact while you're also not you do not need to be putting an hour a day into maintaining your social media channels. And I'm working on the assumption, I do have some information about Twitter in here, but I'm working on the assumption that you're primarily using Facebook. And the reason I make that assumption is just that the users on Facebook tend to be more in the age range that you're working with. Twitter is generally about between the ages of 25 to 34. Instagram also trends younger, but I am here to tell you that the information that I have to present today relates to any social media channel that you're on. And actually, some of it relates to what Kristen was saying about how to be human and how to really connect with people's emotions. So that's what I want to talk about today. And just a real kind of a good transition from what Kristen was talking about to where I'm going is that, we used to have this kind of traditional media, and traditional media spoke down from the halls of power to people. And then social media comes along, and it's kind of it was meant to be a conversation that goes both ways. But what it ended up being is that it doesn't just go up and down, but it also goes horizontally. And that's where the power of social media is. So let's start first with Facebook. I mean, why do people even use Facebook? Okay, so the New York Times did a study, and I want to say it was a few years ago. So things have changed since then, but I don't think it's changed that much, right? So New York Times did this study and found that 84% of people use Facebook to get the word out about causes that they care about. So, Facebook has become more of a toxic place. But that doesn't mean it has to be in our worlds, right? I mean, we are here for social good. And just because other bad actors are tipping the internet towards, more negative space, that means that we need even more to put our energy and our effort into the world of social media, of promoting positive solutions and making social change. And people do come to Facebook just to get the word out about these issues that they care about. 78% come to Facebook to grow and nurture our relationships. And that's where that really human connection becomes so important. But people, you know, when people say like happy birthday posts, and a great one would be to feature a volunteer. And people love coming to look at each other's pictures of their kids or their pets, things like that. Those kind of things that make those human connections. And then 68% of people come to Facebook to define ourselves to others. So we want to say, okay, I am a person who cares very much about the well-being of folks who are aging, just as an example, right? And so you're going to make these posts that have to do with that topic, so that you show people, hey, I'm the type of person who cares about this issue. Don't worry about these check boxes. I'm not sure why they were there. So for some campaign strategies for Facebook is to just build this awareness, right? And so we're going to talk about how to create shareable content, but the best way to get your message outside of your echo chamber is to create content that people want to share. And we'll talk a little bit about, you know, kind of what that means. And you want to give people an opportunity to make a difference. So that could be creating a birthday fundraiser, or it could be directing people to your site so that they can sign up to volunteer themselves. And then also you can really use, one of the things that Facebook is great at is organizing people into groups. So you get these groups of people who are interested in the same thing, and you start inviting them into your group, and it supersedes the algorithm, because every time somebody posts into a Facebook group that you're a member of, you get an alert about it, right? And so this type of content in groups of people who really care about the same thing, it gets a lot more visibility than the posts that you just put onto your page. Twitter, I'm not going to go too much into Twitter, simply because I think we all see the degradation of the platform, but it can be a way to connect with the people who follow you. And so the reasons that people are using Twitter is to get the news, right? And so this is where it's a really important place that when you get that earned media that Kristen was talking about, to put that on your Twitter feed. Another great thing to do is to source other people's articles that are really positive about the issues that you care about, and put those on the internet. I can't remember the exact percentage. You know what it is? It's 70% of people who use Twitter only get their news from Twitter. So that's something to just think about. And then people use it to share their views, and again, to define themselves to others by promoting articles that make them appear like they care very much about something that they want to appear that they care about. And so one of the ways that people, some of the things that Twitter is really good at is using these media-friendly campaigns. So linking to those op-eds that you get based on Kristen's advice, getting people to click through to a petition if that's something that your organization is involved in doing. You can tag legislators, and that gets visibility. If you are doing some advocacy work, that gets you visibility among those legislators so that they know that you're paying attention. And that's important, to get that visibility so that they know that you are, as a constituent, and your constituents see there's some visibility there about the work that they're doing. And then, of course, raising awareness by using hashtags. And that's another way that you can get outside of your echo chamber, is because that content is being shown to people by the people that they know and that they care about. Now on Facebook, we recommend not using hashtags, because Facebook is more of a conversational place, and it's kind of a barrier to have to read the hashtag and try to make sense about what it means. At least that's my experience. But Twitter, people are used to using hashtags. Same with Instagram. If you're on Instagram showcasing those beautiful pictures of the people that you work with, that's another place where people can discover things using hashtags. And so here's where it really gets interesting, right? Is that 54%, and I'm sure this number has gone down since the survey was taken, but 54% of people trust the information that comes from NGOs. 83% is the number of people who trust recommendations from friends and family. So when you get your content to a place where it's shareable, that's where you start to not only get your message outside to other people who may not otherwise see it, but also it's coming from the people that these folks trust. It's coming from their friends and family and the people who influence them, which is what makes a really big difference. That's why sharing, like it's one of the first things that we learn to do as children, is to share. And sharing shareable content is really the magic of social media. So let's think about what is shareable content, right? It's emotional. So it is not talking like a PSA or like a robot, but talking the way that you would talk to anybody else. If you have content that you're trying to get out there, just stop and think for a moment, how would I say this to my mom? How would I say this to the person that I'm sitting with at the bus stop? How would I express this to somebody that I actually know? And if you can't imagine yourself saying it, then it's probably time to go back and think of a different way to say it. Writing for social media can be pretty hard. It's entertaining, right? So finding, it doesn't have to be all facts and figures all the time. Like you can entertain people with memes and things like that. It's very human. So again, before you write your content, just take a moment to close your eyes and imagine that you're sitting across somebody at the dinner table or at a cafe and think about how would you say it to them, right? It's relevant, much like Kristen was talking about. It's new, it's happening now. It's short. So it is shorter than the way I'm talking right now, right? It's content that people can digest in a pretty quick amount of time because they are scrolling through. It's also conversation starting. So this is where you can ask questions about how people feel about anything as mundane as the weather, right? Like just get ask some questions to get people talking in the comments. And then it's also value oriented. So that's where you make these mission statements, like take your content and make a statement like everyone deserves the right to respect and dignity. And that's the type of thing where people would want to share that because they want to show the world what they care about. And so having these value-oriented content also gets kind of out there into the world. It's also helpful. People like to help their friends and family by giving them tips and tricks and facts and information that they would be able to use. So anything that you have that would be helpful to folks, people are likely to share that. It's also empathetic, right? And like I said, it's magic. It really gets your word out there to people who may not otherwise be following your issue. And so here are just some really quick kind of tips about how to create all of this great content. Like, you know what it is, but how do you create it? And that's a whole nother art. And what I really want to emphasize is that the creating this content doesn't have to take a lot of time because I know you have so many other things that you're doing. So I just want to emphasize that it doesn't have to take a lot of time. And I'm going to show you some tips and tricks about how to do that. So you have 1 second to get people's attention. Say you have this great infographic that you got from one of your resources where you find information. This is when I worked with the World Health Organization. We did a test about what happens when you put the content that's in the infographic as part of the post versus just asking the question, wait, what are the causes of antibiotic resistance? And people want to know, what are the causes, right? And so you can see that there was 3% engagement on the one where there was a lot more text before the actual infographic, which was really well done. 0.2% of it was shares, and it got 17% viral reach. Whereas on the other side, there was 5% engagement, but 20% of it was shares because people see that image right there at the top and want to share that. And that meant that 80% of this content was viral reach. And so one thing that we can all be kind of tempted to do is to do clickbait and sharebait and engagement bait. And so that's where you say something like share widely. So on the left-hand side, without sharebait, you can see that it was really helpful information that got 218 shares, which is huge. They posted the exact same content, but with the content was share widely. And Facebook and other platforms actually suppress content that has language like that. So just make that really important statement or share that information that's helpful without asking people to, click on it, share it, things like that. So we do say to post 2 to 3 times a day, which can feel intimidating. Keep in mind that you can schedule posts way out in advance. So you can have a brainstorming session at the beginning of the week and schedule your posts so that you don't have to go in and do it every single day. But here are some ways that you can get that content pretty quickly. So number 1 is repurposing content. So say you have an annual report, or you have a news article, you just did a photo shoot with some volunteers. Anything that you already have, you can, it looks good on mobile, right? You can turn that into a post. Another thing we talk about is stacking content. And all stacking content means is that you take the same piece of content, repurpose it, like repackage it a little bit, and then you're able to use it over and over and over again, much like the when you have infographics or content that you can just repurpose for social. So here's an example from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You can see they had this one photo shoot, right? And they put it at the front of their annual letter. Then they have the exact same photo, but they used, and you can use Canva, you can use some really simple tools to just change it just a little bit, and it looks like fresh content. This is from the same photo shoot. You don't need multiple photo shoots, right? And then there they go, they did it again. Use the same photo shoot, use the same treatment, but they've got multiple pieces of content. Another example is here where, and it's kind of a cluttered slide, but what I'm trying to express here is that on the left-hand side, there is this infographic with a lot of information. It's only one infographic, right? But you can take that infographic and split it out into 4 different infographics. And there you go, you have 2 days of content right there based on one piece of content that you already had. And then reposting high performing content is especially good for Facebook, because in Facebook, about 2 to 10% of people are going to see your organic content. So when you repost it, not like every day, I'll give you some kind of guidelines around how often to do it. But when you repost it, if it's already performing well, it's going to continue to perform well. And that's a real big tip on social media, is that if it performs well, it's proven to perform well, and it will perform well again. I'll pause here just to say that if you ever have a budget for ads, right? If you have $100 a month that you can spend on ads, what I highly, highly recommend is take a post that is already performing well. Like you just hit on something that people are paying attention to, and then put $100 behind it for a month. And that post that you repurpose, that you put back out there, is going to perform far better than something that you just make up on the spot. Like, it's proven to work and it will work again. The great thing about ads is that the cost of them goes down the better the content is. So if you have content that is already very shareable, and then you put a little bit of money behind it, it's going to reach more people who are going to share it to even more people. And that's how the cost of those Facebook ads come down. So here's an example from the CDC. You can see they posted this common causes of if you need antibiotics, like common causes of these different things that can get you sick. So they posted it, it got 3.2 thousand shares. And then they posted it again a few months later and it got 10,000 shares. Then they posted it again the following month, actually, and it got 5,000 shares. Waited another month, tweaked it a little bit. It got 5,000 shares again in December. Then a little bit later in December, still we're getting 2.5 thousand shares in June 20th. Posted it again, got 647 shares, which is still pretty good. Following month, posted it again, 1.3 thousand shares, 6.2 in October, and on and on. It just kept going on. So I think you get the point there, is that if you find something that works really, really well, you can make some minor tweaks to it and post it maybe once every other month, or once every other month or once a month, and see if it keeps performing well. If it doesn't, abandon it, no problem, right? If you make a mistake on social media, it's a great place to make mistakes, because if you make a mistake, nobody sees it, right? So that's one of the reasons why Facebook is a great place to experiment with things and try new things. Another thing is to focus on faces when you're using photographs, and you may need to get some consent forms. I'm sure you already have those systems set up. If you don't, go on the internet and search for just a basic consent form for photographs. But really, people are programmed to respond to people's faces, right? And so you can see in this example here, I've got 2 posts that I'll show you. With this one, there are 27 likes on this very small nonprofit's post on Instagram. And you scroll down to their next post, and it actually has a tiny picture of hands, and it only got 13 likes as opposed to the 27. And I think the difference that you can see here is that the one on the left is human. There's a quote in the post. It's about the person. The layout is pretty interesting. And then on the right-hand side, you have a small picture that doesn't include somebody's face. There are words in the picture that are actually bigger than the picture, which people just aren't looking for when they're going to Instagram as much. There are some people who do. They aren't looking for that as much. And the post itself kind of keeps going and keeps going. You can't see how long it is, but it is a much longer post than what you see with the one on the left. And so another great way to get shareable content is to just start some conversations. And so if you post a story that you were able to gather from a volunteer, resident, a patient, and then ask a question, well, here's a story about somebody, it's relatable. Why do you stand up, right, for people who are in this same situation? Or how do you respond to folks who in your life are going through this same situation? And that's where you get a lot of comments and people starting to share their own stories by asking a very human question after showing a very human post. Minimize your branding. I'm not sure how much branding that that you're using in your posts already. But you can see this one on the left that has fewer likes. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but these 2 organizations have a pretty similar amount of followers. So on the left-hand side, you can see the post is about the organization. Great picture, great quote, love it, but there's a lot of branding on that one. Whereas the one on the right, it's also like, it's a human type of post. But the branding is very, very minimal. Now, of course, that's not the only difference between these 2 pieces of content, but you can see that having too much branding can distance people from the message and from the post that you're putting out there. And then, of course, I'm sure you're doing this, you're curating content, just follow organizations that are similar to your own and share their content, share their high performing content. I do want to make that distinction, is that when you're sharing other people's content, make sure that it has a lot of likes, it has a lot of interaction, it has a lot of shares, because it goes back to that basic rule that if it's performing well in one way, it's highly likely to perform elsewhere. And the reason I have this 80-20 is because you can do as much of 80% of your content is curated and 20% of it is original. So you don't have to have so much pressure to always be coming up with content that is just strictly yours, that you came up with from scratch. Always remember that we're mobile first. So when you are creating your content and you have pictures, make sure that the pictures are pretty big, that you're thinking about how if you use a short amount of text, that people are going to be able to see that and capture it, and be able to see it on a tiny screen. You want to make sure that people can see stuff on a tiny screen. Diversify your content mix. Okay, here's a piece of pizza with some broccoli. And the reason I have this on here is that, yes, you need your folks to get some really enriching nutritional information. That's your broccoli. But sometimes you need to give them some cheese to get them to actually eat that broccoli. So putting up some funny anecdotes every once in a while, a funny meme that you see elsewhere, keeps people engaged, so that you're diversifying that mix. You're doing some pictures, you're doing some videos, some stuff is funny, some stuff is more serious, and then also giving them that really valuable, enriching information. Using video is great. So people wait, I have to remember the fact and make sure I'm being accurate. They gaze 5 times longer at a moving picture than they do on a still photo. And that is just, where everything is moving, and it's kind of like the shiny object thing, right? People pay attention to things that are in motion. If you are going to do video, for accessibility, and also because people frequently don't have their sound on while they're scrolling through their content, is to use captions, and then try going live. Now, if you go live, especially on Facebook or on Instagram, you are alerting all of your followers that you are doing something right now in the moment. And there are some great ideas. There's some great ways you can do that. You can say, oh, hey, we're going to take a tour of the facility. Come with us, right? And walk through and show people what it looks like behind the scenes. Or if you are at an event somewhere, you can just go live there and just walk around and describe what you're seeing. And people are really likely to engage with that. I love this one. NPR was very creative and did one where they say, hey, can you beat us at writing headlines? And so they put up a whiteboard and encouraged people in the comments to write their own headlines to see if they could beat the ones that the folks at NPR were writing. So you can get really creative, but you also can just do something as simple as, hey, I want to, one of the great things that I saw a community health center do is that they provided a cooking class for healthy meals, right? And you just have one person filming with their mobile device and one person doing this cooking class for a very basic meal, and they got a ton of interaction with that. So just think creatively about when you could go live, knowing that you don't need fancy equipment. Our little handheld devices are good enough to go live and really do get people paying attention. So just remember, social media, great place to fail, because if you fail, it's because nobody sees it. So do try and experiment with some new things that you think that your audience is going to respond to. Really experiment. And then I just gave you all of these rules, break them, try new things. And the reason I say that is we were working with an organization that was a storytelling organization, and they were putting these Instagram posts with long stories before that became kind of part of the trend with Instagram. So Instagram was at the, kind of more short clips, just like it was on Facebook. Well, they said, okay, we're going to go ahead and just put these long posts on Instagram. And they got so much engagement and broke the rules. They were totally right. So do feel like you can try new things, that you can experiment, and set those benchmarks. So you can say, okay, I recognize if you set a benchmark about how many people are viewing your content now, try some new things, see where your content is getting more engagement or more shares, and then use pattern recognition to say, oh, okay, well, when we do helpful health tips, then we get more engagement. So I'm going to keep doing more of these helpful health tips. And so I think that that's kind of a great way to take your social media game to the next level. See how you're doing today, try new things, see where you're getting more engagement, less engagement, use pattern recognition to figure out what's working and what isn't, and just keep going from there. And that's all I have today.
Thanks.
Happy to answer questions.
Thanks so much, Katie. That was really fascinating and helpful. And so if anyone has questions for Katie or for Kristen, you can put them in the Q&A. And we do have a few that I want to ask, and I also have a few of my own that I want to add too. So one that just came in is, do you have any advice regarding media releases for staff?
You mean kind of consent forms for folks on staff to provide consent for their photos? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Katie was saying, there's some easy forms online, or you can create one using Google Forms. Keep it real simple, you know, name, address, email, contact information, and then be pretty specific with what they're giving you permission to share. You know, photos, images, your story, where is it going to be shared is nice to get their particular sign off, because somebody might be fine having you share a story or an image with one audience and not with another, for example, somewhere other than social media, or they're okay with it. So get pretty specific with where the information or images are going to be shared. And, you know, sometimes people like to put in a timeline too, so that it's not going to be shared forever, but maybe you have a specific push where you're sharing a bunch of information or images publicly, and you put a time frame around that, months or years. So those are just some ideas. We can certainly create a form if you all don't have one, but yeah.
Great.
Does that answer the question?
I think so. That sounds good to me. So one other question that I saw was, do you have any ideas of free or relatively inexpensive tools to either create or post content? I saw someone mentioned Hootsuite in the Q&A. Anything like that you suggest using?
I like Buffer as well as Hootsuite. I'm pretty agnostic about those two tools. I really like, if you really want to dive into the analytics, Sprout Social is a great one that gives you the ability to post pretty easily, and also give you some good data about what, you know, those patterns that you can expect to see when you're posting content. And I'm so sorry, I just realized my video had been off the whole time, so my apologies for that.
No problem. Do you want to add anything, Kristen?
No, that's great. Thanks.
Great. So another question that came in mentioned that social media has changed during the pandemic, or has it changed during the pandemic? So some of the data on here was from prior to the pandemic. So what have you seen post-pandemic in the changes of the use of social media? And should we be doing anything differently?
You know, I think we're still in a place where people are using it to connect more with their friends and family. And so putting out that content that is really emotional and personal and positive is what people are looking for, especially during the pandemic. And because of all of the electoral things that were happening, people got turned off on Facebook, especially because they felt that it was a very negative place. And they don't want to talk politics on Facebook. What they want to talk about is how their friends and family and neighbors and the people in their community are, what updates in their lives there are. They want to see pictures of people interacting kindly with each other, essentially wanting to see more of that kindness and that emotional connection on Facebook in particular.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned Facebook and Twitter and the differences between them. So should we be posting on both of them the same content, or does the content differ?
That's a great question. So people do come to Twitter and Facebook for different reasons. So I would recommend taking your topics and keeping them the same, but then do package them differently on Twitter than you do on Facebook. And Facebook really using leaning into those photographs and to thinking to yourself, would I say this to a friend? Would I say this post that I created, would I say that to a friend? Whereas on Twitter, presenting things in more of a factual way and in a shorter soundbite will speak better to people on those platforms, because people come to Twitter to hear a certain tone for a certain reason, and that's very different for why they come to Facebook. So thanks for asking. That's a really important distinction.
Thanks. That's helpful. And so I had one more question, and then I'll jump to questions other people asked. So how much money should we be spending on ads in order to see an impact? A general,
general rule. I mean, it depends on what kind of impact you want to see, right? And are you trying to expand your base? I would highly recommend avoiding any kind of Facebook ad that is tailored to getting people to like it. Those are going to be really cheap ads, right? You can spend a very small amount of money and get a lot of followers. The problem is that those aren't quality followers, right? You're going to end up getting a lot of bots and a lot of people who aren't actually interested in your content. What the algorithm is going out and looking for is people who like to like pages, not necessarily people who like your content. And so what I would recommend is you can do as little as $20 a day. If your objective is to get more people to come to your page and quality people to come to your page, you could spend as little as $20 a week boosting content that is already performing really well as engagement ads. And then just watch the comments, right? Like make sure that people are interacting with you in a positive way. If you see a troll, you'll know who a troll is because they're just trying to make you angry, right? And it's absolutely fine to hide that content and make sure that you're interacting then with the people who do have positive comments. And that's where you'll get the most bang for your buck out of those ads, is if you're interacting with the folks who have positive things to say, even if it's just a hey, thanks, or a thumbs up. And another trick that'll make your ad dollars go even further is that if you're using those engagement ads, you're going to get a lot of reactions, like the compassion one or a thumbs up. You can actually click into those. You can click on those and you'll get a list of people who liked the post. Right next to that list is a button that says invite. And so all those people who have positive comments about your or positive reactions to your ad, you can really take that ad money further by inviting those people with positive reactions to like your page. And then they become a more engaged base for your Facebook page. So I would say $20 a week can go a really long way if you're engaging with the people who have positive reactions to your content.
Great, that's much lower than the number I was thinking in my head, so that's good to know.
But it depends on your objective, right? Like
Right.
if you're trying to get more people to your page, I would say $20 a week. If you are trying to recruit volunteers, like you have a much higher bar ask, then that is an entirely different conversation about how much money. You would want to think about how much money does it take to recruit one volunteer and kind of extrapolate from there.
Right, that makes sense. So do you have any thoughts on LinkedIn and how that can be used?
Yeah, LinkedIn is also for users on LinkedIn are also trending older, just like the ones on Facebook are. People come to LinkedIn to kind of show their thought leadership and to be seen as professionals in the field. They are less there to connect, emotionally with folks, but it is a good place, especially if you are looking for volunteers. It's a good place to share some interesting news, some interesting articles, an interesting story, and then encourage people to engage with it. The great thing about LinkedIn is that it is, you're having higher, you'll get less interaction with your posts, absolutely, than you will on Facebook, but they will be of a higher quality, because people are much more respectful, for whatever reason, on LinkedIn than they are on Facebook. But it is a good place to reach an audience that they tend to be wealthier. They tend to trend older, and they tend to be looking to be seen as thought leaders, as people who are sharing information that is really vital to the way that the world works.
Great. So someone asked if you recommend a website where we can find the best hashtags to use for posts. And I imagine on Twitter, there's the trending hashtag, so you can see what other people are looking up, but is there anything else that you use or recommend?
I use Twitter, and I use Instagram Explore features. So I get my data from the platform. There may be better other places where you can find that data, but I do tend to get the data directly from the platforms.
And I might also suggest looking at other groups in this field that you respect and have a big following and are super engaged, and seeing what they're doing, and possibly getting content from them, sharing their content, but also looking at their hashtags. Like, I don't know, Richard Mollett, I'm not following exactly what they're doing on social, but see what if they're using hashtags, that might be kind of a standard to go with.
Yeah, and you mentioned groups, and I know I use Facebook groups a lot. Is that something that we could use to promote the program or gain volunteers?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it was in 2018 that they decided to make Facebook groups. They put more of an investment into Facebook groups than they did to the feed anymore. So that's why you see those rising in prominence. And most people who use Facebook to be in a group. And so by starting a group, you can create a community of people who want to learn more about volunteering, right? Maybe it's a good place to give them training materials about volunteering. It can also be a place, a private place to share stories about what's happening within the communities there. And so it's a really powerful way where Facebook has put a lot of resources behind it and really want people to be using those groups. And it has worked. People are using those groups. So it's a great way to get community going of people who have the shared interest.
Great. And I don't know if this is obvious, but I just wanted to mention that groups are different than pages. So the group could be closed. You can accept certain people and not accept others, where your page would be open for everyone. And I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah. Sure. So the last question I'm seeing in here, so if you have others, please add them. But the last one that I'm seeing in here asks, what is the best, effective, and cheapest way to add through a company? And how do we find those types of companies? So
I'm not
I
sure
don't know
I fully understood the question. Are you asking like for a media company, like a news site, to get a good bang for your buck? Or I'm not sure if I understand the question.
I think that's how I was understanding it as well. But if we're misunderstanding, please type in the chat.
Well, like I said, when it came to paid advertising, in Washington State, even at the state level, we don't have a big budget for buying ads, so very, very small. So for example, like Seattle Times, biggest paper in the state, we can't afford to buy ads on the Seattle Times site or in their print edition. It would cost tens of thousands of dollars. We looked closely at public radio, especially public radio that represents the small stations all over the state that get to these smaller media markets outside of Seattle. That ended up being great bang for the buck. Like I said, $1,000 for hitting, $1,500 or something like that for having a spot run on, I think, over 20 stations. for like 2 months. So, you know, that was great. I think bang for the buck. We've also done digital ads on news sites that are smaller than the Seattle Times, but still major sites, and do email campaigns with them. You know, it really depends on your budget, but there's ways to, you know, go to a news outlet with your budget and say, look, this is all I have. What can you do for me? How many people would I reach? You know, what are your statistics around that, and see if it's worthwhile for you to make that investment in paid. The other thing I would say about all that is try the earned approach first. You know, see where you can get with free media, with pitching stories, with writing columns, with getting a radio station to run a PSA for you for free. Try exhaust that, you know, first, and then if you get nowhere, you know, you can dig into buying. There's also, they're using the term sponsored content now, which honestly is just another word for buy your way into our, you know, universe of our news outlet. Again, there's some smaller outlets like weekly newspapers that they're moving almost entirely online. A lot of them don't print anymore, but you can buy, they call it a sponsored content article. So you would actually write the article, just like those examples I showed you where we wrote an article and AARP carried it. We wrote an article, and I don't know, the Renton Reporter carried it, and it was $400, and it ran for several weeks and stayed on the news site for like a year, and it was $400. And so, you know, there are some more affordable ways to go with paid.
Great. And I just wanted to mention that if you are interviewed for a news story or anything like that, to please send it to us. We share those on our website, on our homepage, whenever an ombudsman is quoted, either on the radio or on TV or for a newspaper. Send them to us, and we really like to read them and share them on our website and in our quarterly newsletter. And I think it's really a good example to show, you know, how people are interacting with the media. Great. So I wanted to go over a few resources that NORC has. And if you have questions or think of them, you know, in the next couple of minutes, please continue to put them in, because we're running a little bit ahead of schedule. So we'll maybe have some time to ask questions if anything comes up while I'm going through a couple of our resources. So these are resources related to communication and ombudsman program promotion. So the first one I wanted to highlight is our program promotion webpage. So this page is sort of the hub for all examples that we receive on program promotion. So you can use these materials as examples to generate your own materials. So on this page, you'll find examples of other programs' social media pages, so you can get an idea of what type of content other programs are posting. You'll find videos that they've created. So these can be YouTube videos, or even their whole YouTube channel we have linked, which includes volunteer recruitment videos or training videos. You'll also find examples of any annual report, brochure, poster, newsletter from a program, and then examples of media outreach training that programs have done. And on our page, we have one from Texas called All Things Media, which includes an example press release. So this page, you'll find all of that sort of information. And if you have anything that you want to share with us, please send it to me, and I'll post it on our website. So if you have a newsletter or a brochure from your program, we would love to put it on our site. And so I wanted to just highlight a couple other things that are located within this page. So the first is this video called What is the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, or what is the Long-Term Care Ombudsman? And so this video is really short, and it provides a nice explanation of the Ombudsman program. And it also includes a link at the end to our Find Your Ombudsman program map. So this is not branded with any state-specific information. It'll take you to the map where anyone can click on their state and then find their program. So any state can use this, and it'll lead people to you. The next promotional item I wanted to mention is this postcard. So similar to the video, it provides an overview of the program, and it's really small, the size of a postcard, so you can bring it with you into facilities. And we have it available on our website in 3 different versions. And one of the versions is customizable, so you can add your program's contact information on the back of it. And then, oops, went too fast. And then the next is this infographic. So again, it's similar. It provides an overview of the program and the impact that ombudsmen have around the nation. It provides statistics from NORS data. So this can be used for volunteer recruitment or just general program promotion. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is we encourage you to join our technical assistance talk on March 15th. It is from 3 to 4 Eastern time, and it will be on communication as well. So Katie and Kristen are going to join that call as well, and they'll answer any lingering questions you have or anything you think of once this webinar ends. And these calls, these TA talks are not webinars, they are Zoom meetings. So we'll briefly provide some resources and information at the beginning, but the main part of the meeting will be a dialogue, and where attendees will have time to seek to seek technical assistance and ask questions. So we encourage you to share your expertise and experiences and provide peer-to-peer support with each other on this call, especially since it's a meeting, so you'll be able to talk over audio and video rather than a webinar where you just have to chat. So the last thing I wanted to say is just to join our email list if you are not already on our list, just so you're aware of any future training opportunities and new resources as they are released. So you can visit this link to sign up. And I think that's all. Let me just check and see if there's questions before we close out. Oh, someone asked, how much are the postcards? I think that's very good information. You can download them for free on our website. We used to have them in the store, for purchase, so I'll have to check, but you can download the artwork for them for free, so you can print them yourself, or just print them using a regular computer printer. And oh, someone else asked, are there free versions of the postcard? Yeah, they're free. It's a digital download on our website. And I see Libby has put all the links to these resources in the chat, so you can download them all. And again, this recording and PowerPoint will be emailed to everyone once the webinar is over. Okay, Katie and Kristen, do you have anything to add before we close out?
Thank you so much for having us. And I just want to personally encourage you all to give it a try. Every time you try and you work with media more, or digital media and communications more, just gives you more experience and ideas. And we're here to support. And, I at least can throw myself out if anybody wants to talk anything through before you get started. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you. All right, we will talk to you soon and see you March 15th. Bye, everyone.
Sounds good. Bye.